right, so hello everybody and welcome once again to my kitchen. We are going to be doing hopefully some pretty exciting things today. As you can see, we got a bunch of things in front of me. One of them, as you can see, being yeast, a little bit of butter, baking powder and soda, and we've got the old KitchenAid. So you can put a couple of these things together. You can only guess that we're going to be talking about bread today. But before we start to make our bread, it's really important that you understand first the ingredients, and then you understand the process of making the bread. So first, let's get into a little bit of what we're going to be using kind of for the basics for your bread making. So we have a bunch of different things in front of us. Let's start with some of these things that are over here. So the first one we have labeled in our container here, we have some yeast. Specifically, this is called dry yeast. Okay, it looks like a tiny little brown grain, but it's actually alive. If we can think back to when we talked about preservation and the things that make food spoil, right? This is one of them, right? It's a microbe, and despite that it's dry and it looks like a grain, it is still living. I have these four things grouped together because they're an important part of bread making. These four things are what we call leaveners. Okay, so to leaven something means to make it rise. So by using yeast, you can make bread rise. It gives it that light and airy texture by our yeast living. Okay, so when the yeast live, they eat things, right? To activate our yeast, we use warm temperature, right? So we do that through warm water. And then you have to feed the yeast, right? With what we have here, right? Simple granulated sugar. Sugar isn't just for flavor inside of your breads, it's also food. So the yeast eats the sugar, and the byproduct of the yeast eating sugar is them emitting carbon dioxide gas. This is what makes the bread that you make light and airy, and this is what makes the bread rise. So the carbon dioxide gas is what leavens your bread. Okay, so that's one type of leavener that you have in your bread. Another one we have is this guy, baking powder. Okay, baking powder is a chemical leavener. Once again, thinking about preservation, right? Baking powder is an acid, is acidic. More specifically, it's a mixture, dry mixture of something that's a little bit of a base, so high pH, and a strong acid, something that is a low pH. So when you add this to your bread mixture with liquid, it has a reaction that emits carbon dioxide gas. So this is a chemical way to leaven a bread. Next to that, we have baking soda. Okay, baking soda is another type of chemical leavener, but it's a little bit different. Now, when we talked about baking powder, I said that it's a mixture of a lot of acid, a lot of dry acid, and a little bit of a base. Baking soda is a base. So to activate baking soda as a leavener, to emit your carbon dioxide, you need to use an acid. So often when you use something like baking soda, you might add an egg or lemon juice, vinegar, or buttermilk, right? And they help those acids work with the base. They have the similar reaction as baking powder, and carbon dioxide gas is emitted. And the last one that can also be a leavener, right, is a simple one here, butter, right? Remember, butter is an emulsion. It's a mixture of 3 different things together to look like one thing. And those things, remember, are protein, oil, and water, okay? When the butter cooks into the bread, that water starts to evaporate. And contrary to these, not like these, where it's carbon dioxide gas, the water vapor is what lifts and creates air inside of the bread when it's cooked. So these 3 things, we'll talk a little bit more about this one, and actually we'll talk a little bit more about all of them shortly, after we finish with a few more of these ingredients for bread making. So we talked about sugar, right? Sugar can be used for flavor, and it's our food for our yeast, okay, our natural leavener. And we have salt. Salt is so important, right? Because you've heard me say it once, you've heard me say it a million times. You season everything that you make. And salt is that critical thing inside of bread. You can do everything right, have the best recipe, and not season with salt, and your bread will just taste flat. It can have every other characteristic that you like, but if you don't add enough salt, it won't have that enhanced flavor that you're really looking for in your bread. Okay, so we've talked about a lot of, let's talk about water. Water is another important ingredient when you're talking about bread making. I forgot it because I didn't put it in front of me, but yes, water is another ingredient. And then you've got the most important ingredient, which is flour. Okay, so let's take just a moment to talk a little bit about flour and the different types. The one that we're most familiar with is this, right? We have our AP, which stands for all-purpose flour. Okay, once again, all-purpose flour meaning we can use it for anything. When you think about its characteristics, it's right in the middle for the different types of uses that you can use it for. So it's not the best for bread making, but you can use it, it's okay. It's not the best for pastries, but it's still okay, you can use it. And it's, we use it day to day because of its versatility. Okay, when I say all-purpose flour has characteristics that are in the middle, what I'm really talking about is 2 different things. How fine the flour is, and the protein concentration or percentage inside the flour. Okay, the protein percentage is something that is important in bread making because the percentage of protein relates to how strong the gluten is inside of the bread the dough that you're going to make. And when I say the gluten, that's what gives the dough that you make its strength. Think about it like small strings being tied together to make a rope, right? How strong that that bread is going to be. So above something like all-purpose flour, the flour with the highest concentration of protein, percentage of protein, is bread flour. Okay, bread flour has that high percentage of protein, so it's gonna make very strong gluten. That's the thing that's going to give your bread its texture, and it's going to allow it to make that really nice crust on the outside. Two things that you're really looking for when you're talking about bread. You want that really great mouthfeel when you bite into it, and you want that nice crunchy crust on the outside. And the high percentage of protein is what helps with that in your bread flour. Okay, so you're talking about the highest level percentage. You've got bread flour, below that, all-purpose flour, and then you've got your other specialty flours, right? You've got flours like, cake flour is gonna come next. I lied, sorry. Pastry flour will come next. So you've got bread flour, highest percentage, all-purpose flour, then you've got pastry flour, because there are still some, you still do need a little bit of gluten when you're making some types of pastries, but you want it to be a little bit lighter, right? You don't want a really chewy crust like a baguette when you're talking about a pastry like a croissant, right? You want light and flaky, not tough and chewy, okay? And then last, you're gonna have cake flour, okay? Cake flour has the lowest percentage of protein. So when you're mixing a cake, you can mix it for a long time. Not a lot of gluten is going to develop, and then you're going to get that wonderful light, almost smushy, not smushy, but let's say spongy texture that you're really looking for inside of a cake. So those are the different types of flour. Now, I'm saying flour, what I'm talking about is the product that's made from wheat, right? I'm talking about wheat flour. All of our flour that we have is processed, which is the reason why they're all white. So outside of having bleached, actually I might say on this package, it says unbleached flour, but you'll see this is still white, right? It's milled to take off the outside, which is brown, and then ground, and so that it looks white. You can have something called whole wheat flour, right? Whole wheat flour looks speckled brown. I don't know if you can see inside of here, right? It looks speckled brown, and that's because the whole grain is used in making the flour. So those brown parts all go into it. So your texture is going to be a little bit different because it's got those brown parts that are a little bit harder than the inside. That's that nice soft white that we're all accustomed to. As well, we have our other flours, right? I put air quotes because when we say flour, we're typically talking about milled wheat, right? There are other things that we make into powders that we call flour, right? We can use different types of wheat grains, like farro, for example, that can be milled into flour. We can also use other grains like dry corn, right? It can be milled very fine to become flour. And then things like beans. You take lentils or chickpeas, dry them, and process them to become a flour. So yeah, those are the pretty much the main ingredients for making your bread, right? You got your leavener, salt and sugar, flour, and water. Now there are other things that you can put into your bread as components to make different types of bread. Those 5 are pretty much the main ones. The other things I'm talking about that I've left out are dairy, milk can be added, and eggs in some breads as well. But these guys right here are the basics. So we know our ingredients. Let's talk a little bit about the types of breads and the actual process. So when we talk about breads, I guess we'll make a distinction of 3 different categories of bread. One of them we're pretty familiar with in the restaurant, right? Something called a quick bread, right? When you talk about a quick bread, that's when you're talking about things like some cakes, right? Things like banana bread or zucchini bread, right? And biscuits, right? Biscuits are a quick bread. And when we say quick bread, we're talking about something specific, right? We're talking about our chemical leaveners, right? It's like the 3rd grade science experiment for a lot of people. When you drop when you do the mixture of baking soda and water, and it foams up a lot, right? The action for your chemicals to make that carbon dioxide gas is very fast. These are the leaveners that you use in quick breads, right? Fast leaveners give those breads their name, quick breads. Does that make sense? The next category, we'll call them naturally leavened breads, right? Naturally leavened breads are going to use yeast, right? This can be by 2 different ways. Once again, going back to talking about preservation, we talked a little bit about our environment here in our apartment and or our house. Naturally in the air, there's yeast, right? And so we can use that to naturally leaven our bread. It's through the creation of something called a starter, right? So starters are simply made with flour and water and sugar, and the natural fermentation of those things in your kitchen. Okay, so it can either be by starter, or you can use dry yeast, or moist yeast, but you can use an actual yeast that you buy. So there's 2 different ways in these breads. Either that natural fermentation using your starter, or adding a yeast, whether wet or dry. Okay, and then the last bread is the one that we're going to be making together. Okay, so the last bread is called a flatbread. And it's called a flatbread, I'm sure you can guess, because no leavener is used, right? It's just flour and water, right? Flat bread, right? No leavener, doesn't rise, you just have something flat. And everybody knows everybody's seen a version of a flatbread before. Let's say, my mind's a blank. Naan, right, is an example of a flatbread. Crackers can be an example of a flatbread. They have a range between, a little bit moist and chewy to something that's very, very crunchy. Some flatbreads, oddly enough, do use some yeast. And we're going to be making a flatbread that does use yeast. The flatbread that we are going to be making together is called Pita. All right, so in front of us we have all of our ingredients to make our pita. Okay, so we have our salt, our yeast, sugar for feeding our yeast, and our bread flour and all-purpose flour. And we've got some warm water for our yeast to live in. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is we want to wake up our yeast. Okay, the yeast are sleeping right now. They're dry. All right, so the first thing we want to do is we want to take about a half a cup of our warm water. Okay, I'm going to put in 2.5 teaspoons of our yeast. Right, and then we're gonna put in our food, right? Our 2 teaspoons of sugar. Right, and we'll give it a stir. Okay, we'll dissolve our sugar inside of our yeast. Inside of our water, so that our yeast can eat it. Okay, and immediately what you see happen is our water gets a little cloudy, it starts to clump up a little bit, but it smells like fresh baked bread, right? Instantly. Okay? So what we're gonna do is we're gonna give our yeast a little bit of time to wake up. Okay? At least 5 minutes. Just let it hang out there. Okay? What you'll see happen immediately is a whole bunch of bubbles will start coming out. That's our yeast waking up, right? And starting to eat, right? It's like when you wake up in the morning, whew, famished, eat some breakfast, right? That's what our yeast is doing right now, okay? So, next, we need to get our dry ingredients together. Remember, when we're working with our pastry and with our breads, we're always gonna take our dry ingredients, take our wet ingredients, and we're gonna add our wet to the dry. Okay, so we've got our KitchenAid stand mixers ready to go. All right. And this one attachment that we never use, okay, now we're using it, all right? Our dough hook, okay? So we're gonna measure out our flour. Okay, we're gonna take 2 cups of our all-purpose flour. So we have our 2 cups of all-purpose flour. Then we're going to add 2 cups of our bread flour. Okay. 2 cups of one, 2 cups of the other. That means we have a 1-to-1 ratio. Bread flour to all-purpose flour. So 1. All right, our flour is in. Last ingredient, our salt, right? We're gonna add 1.5 teaspoons of salt. All right. And that is everything. So next, what we're going to do, we're going to mix together those dry ingredients. All right. So, remember, safety first. KitchenAid is off. All right. We're going to take our bowl. We're put it in at the angle. Put our little KitchenAid thumbs. Use those to put down our bowl. Then we push down the back to lock it in place. Alright. Okay. Now we'll take our dough hook. It's in place. Now we can plug her in. So everything's off. Alright. Raise it up. Now we'll turn her on so that everything mixes, all the dry ingredients mix together. Make sure everything's getting in there. Extra credit to anybody who knows what the heck this is all about. Right. Just make sure everything's actually getting down in there. Give it another mix for a second. Great. So, our dry ingredients are well mixed. And now, like I said, with our yeast, when we take a look, it looks tan and foamy, right? We see all those tiny little bubbles. That's the activation. It's happening right in front of our eyes. Our yeast is eating the sugar inside of the water, making carbon dioxide bubbles, okay? So we want to get this, our liquid, inside of our dry to make our dough. So we'll turn our KitchenAid on low. Okay, we're gonna add our water and yeast and sugar mixture. So as you can see, there's not enough moisture in there, right? It needs a little bit more. Okay, we're gonna take another half cup of our water. We're gonna add that as well. First, we're gonna scrape down the sides, make sure everything's getting in there. All right, and here we go again. So in total, that was 1 cup of water. But it's still kind of hot and dry in here. So it looks like it's going to need a little bit more water. You don't want to add too much water. You want to give it some time to naturally form your dough ball. Okay, this process of the flour mixture, our dry, and our wet coming together, okay, this is called kneading. Okay, not only is this the process for making our dough ball, but this is also how we start to develop the gluten. So one thing that we don't want to do is over knead. We only need to knead this until it forms a ball. And it starts to pull everything away from the sides of the bowl. Okay? So when you look at our dough, right, rolling around the bowl, it's just taking everything that's on the sides off. Your ball of dough is together and it's a little bit sticky, right? This is the point in which we know we're finished. Okay? We're together. We're ready. So next, what we want to do is we want to put our dough inside of a bowl. Okay? Once we get it inside of our bowl, we just want to top it with some plastic. We want to put it in a warm place. Because we want our dough to rise. Okay? What this is called is proofing. Okay? When we talk about the process of bread making, you're going to do a few different things, right? We activate our leavener. We knead our dough. And then we proof our dough. When we say proof, what we mean is to continue the fermentation process. Fermentation just means the living process of our yeast, eating the sugar, making carbon dioxide, and the result inside of the dough is it rising, right? It expanding. It's necessary to do this because you want to, the gluten that you developed, you want to continue to develop it so that it expands when we bake our bread, and then provides structure as well. So our bread doesn't rise, bake, and then fall flat, right? That happens when you overproof something, right? When you overproof, it makes more and more air and it breaks that gluten, and then it has no structure, right? When you underproof, you don't stretch out that gluten enough, and then you've got a tougher bread that doesn't look as, it doesn't rise as much, and it can be tough. So you want to have that right in the middle, okay? So what we're going to do, we are going to allow our dough to rise or to proof for about 1 hour, okay? What you're looking for is a nice spongy texture, and the dough ball is going to expand to about double in size. Okay, so we're going to wait 1 hour on our dough to proof, and then we will continue the process for our pita. Okay. All right, so it's been about 1 hour. And as you can see with our dough, it's risen, right? It's filled up the bowl nicely. Boy, I should have plastic wrapped the top. Put a little oil on my plastic, but that's okay. Nice and warm. Okay. So our dough has risen. And now what we want to do is we want to begin to portion our dough so that we can make individual pieces of pita. So what we want to do is we just want to take little balls. We want to just kind of pinch them off like this in one hand, and kind of twist. Okay, we'll have balls, you know, about the size of a baseball, all right, or a ball that kind of fits in the palm of your hand. Okay, and then we're just going to take those and put them on our lightly floured surface right here. And so from what I had, should probably get somewhere between 6 and 8 balls. So right now what we're doing is we're just portioning our dough, because we're not going to make a giant piece of pita, we're going to make individual pitas. Okay, so once again, our dough has undergone a fermentation, right? Meaning the yeast has been eating the sugar. It eats the sugar and it makes carbon dioxide. And that carbon dioxide stretches out our dough. That's making it rise. We're portioning individual balls of our dough. And then from there, we're going to have it do one more fermentation. Okay, so one more proofing. Once we do that, our pita will be ready to cook. So right now what you want to do is you want to turn your oven on. You want to turn it all the way up. 500 degrees will be a good temperature for our pita. Also, on the inside of our oven, what you're going to want is to have, as if you're making pizza, you're going to want to have either a stone or a heavy piece of metal, like our large cast iron plancha from the restaurant, which is inside of the oven. So when you open up the oven, you can see inside we have our plancha. Okay, and so that plancha is getting very hot. So the pita is going to cook, our flatbread is going to cook on top of our plancha inside of our very, very hot oven. And so what that's going to do is that it's going to give it that really nice texture on the outside. It's going to heat it on the contact side very quickly. It's going to cause that bread to rise, and that's what's going to give that pocket inside of our pita. And then the very hot oven is going to cook the top side as well. And so what's going to happen is that our pita dough is going to cook very quickly in about 3 to 4 minutes. Okay, so we got our portioned dough. I portioned out 6 on our lightly floured surface so that it doesn't stick. And then on top of that, I'm going to put a damp towel. Okay, just so they don't dry out. Okay, and once again, this is where our pita is going to, our dough is going to undergo its second fermentation or its second proofing. So that same process is going to happen again. Yeast is still eating the sugar inside of the dough. It's going to make more carbon dioxide, and these balls are going to expand a little bit more. It's going to be bigger than a baseball. It's going to be maybe between a baseball size and a softball size. Or let's put it in a fruit. We're going to go from a normal sized orange to a grapefruit or a large onion. So this is what we're looking for our rise to be. Okay, so that process is going to take approximately another 30 minutes. So we're going to let these proof for the second time. and we'll be back to finally roll out our dough and cook our dough in 30 minutes. Okay, so 30 minutes is up, and we can see our dough has risen approximately 1.5 times the size. So now it's already on our floured surface, so it's not going to stick too much. What we want to do now is roll out our dough so it's ready for us to cook. It's very warm in this kitchen. Okay, so I have my trusty smooth bottle here that I use for my rolling pin. I can take my dough. I'm going to roll it out flat. Now remember, you always want to roll from the center out. Okay, want to make sure we continue to get it into approximately a round shape. Okay, and when we're rolling our dough, we don't want to roll it too thin, right? We want to make pita, we don't want to make a completely flat bread. So we're going to roll it approximately 1/4 inch. Just like this. Okay, so we have a nice size pita. All right, our oven is on, super hot, right? 500 degrees, waiting for us. And our cast iron or piece of metal or stone is inside of the oven nice and hot as well. So now what we're gonna do, we're gonna put our pita inside of the oven for about 3 to 4 minutes, okay? So we'll take it, toss it in, okay? And then let it go. All right, so once again, it is very, very hot inside, so it's gonna cook very quickly from the bottom and from the top as well. It's going to make, from all the air that's inside, it's gonna make that wonderful pocket inside of our pita so that we can use it for in a few different ways, right? If you wanted to make a sandwich with that pita, you've got that nice little pocket there. If not, it's just a nice little natural platform to scoop up dips and things like that. So what you'll find is the outside is going to be nice and crunchy. The inside is going to be nice and light and airy, and it's going to have that that very yeasty kind of flavor that you're accustomed with when you're eating yeast breads. So we've got another 2.5 minutes or so. So in the meantime, we can get another ball of dough flat and ready. So we'll carefully kind of pick up our dough. And once again, on our lightly floured surface, a little bit more flour on my quote-unquote rolling pin. Okay. Roll out in all directions. First you'll north, south, east, and west, and then the directions on the angles. So northwest, northeast, southwest, southeast. Okay. Once again, we're rolling to about 1/4 inch. Okay, just like this. Fantastic. So we have our pita, next pita, ready to go inside of the oven. Everything inside of this oven is super, super hot once again. So we're going to use some tongs to get our pita outside of the oven in just about another 1.5 minutes or so. One thing that we can do as well, we can take the pita that we've just made. Let's take a little bit of parchment paper. Okay, and we can layer our dough together. can roll out the rest of our pita while we have one in the oven. So what I found is, just like any other bread, this bread is best fresh out of the oven. So literally super, super hot. Tear it open so it's nice and steamy. And then just eat it as a delicious piece of fresh bread. All right, so we're almost ready to check on our first pita. We'll get another piece of parchment paper together. Okay, and we'll roll out one more pita, and then we will check on our first one. Get a little dry, don't worry. I'm sorry, a little sticky, don't worry. Just add a little bit more flour and everything is more. All right, I can smell that dough as well. So I think our pita, our first one is ready. Our second one right here is also ready. Great. So we'll get our tongs. Okay. Whew. And just like that, exactly what we're looking for. Okay, we can get our next pita inside of the oven. All right, so once again, that's inside a 500-degree oven. So it's pretty hot. But just to show you what I mean, right? Okay, nice and golden brown on all sides. You see it's puffed up, nice and airy. And then we can just take our knife. Okay, it's got that classic pocket, exactly what we're looking for, right? So there we have it, our wonderful pita bread. Right. Cooked in only about 3 to 4 minutes in our 500-degree oven on top of either a stone or a heavy metal like a cast iron skillet. And that is pretty much it. That is how we make our flatbread. Once again, this particular bread that we made had yeast in it. Your typical flatbread, other than pita, will probably not have yeast in it. Once again, just the flour and water, maybe a little bit of salt and sugar, and cooked in the same fashion. Maybe not even inside of the oven, but just on top of the grill or on top of a plancha. And just cooked for 1 or 2 minutes on each side. Maybe finish it with a little olive oil. Ooh, speaking of which, that'd be a great way to try this pita. We can just finish it with a little bit of olive oil. Yummy. Maybe a sprinkle of za'atar. Yummy. Yeah. Right where you want it to be. And as well, remember, things like naan, things like pizza dough, these are all different types of flatbreads, just made in with slightly different recipes or ratios of your flour and water and sugar, salt, and sometimes yeast. And that's it. Thank you for joining me tonight, and I hope you learned a little bit and will enjoy this recipe at home.